Imagine after a long day, you come here and you are amongst 399 other people and you just want to go to sleep, right? But when you get there, somebody may be playing music in one of their pods, somebody may be having company and having relations in another pod, somebody may be talking in the common area and it's echoing enough to a point where you can hear it. You may come back to your pod and your pillow is missing. I mean, this is the type of stuff that you're going to have to go through when it comes to this type of living. And it's so intriguing to me that in some markets, this is actually in such high demand that there is a waiting list. Specifically, the 35 unit pod that this startup had, at one point there was a waiting list. So this is in demand in certain markets.
This is a place for everyone. This is a place for artists. This is a place for people who need a cheap place to live.
So there is a San Francisco startup that just bought a building in downtown San Francisco, and they're planning to install 400 sleeping pods at $700 a month inside what they're calling a mega dorm. Honestly, this concept is really, really bold to implement. And what better place to do it than in San Francisco? If you've ever been to San Francisco, it is what an amazing city. It is just beautiful. They do have their challenges, however. And one of the challenges is housing, is affordability. And this is maybe one way to tackle the affordability crisis that San Francisco is currently having right now. So I would say this concept is pretty innovative, but also quite a bit dystopian. And I am really hoping and praying that this is not a shape of what's to come in the near future when it comes to the solution for affordability across the country. But this concept may theoretically work in certain areas across the country. Not everywhere, but certain places like San Francisco. With that said, as somebody who builds housing, invests in neighborhoods, and studies development models from across the country, I do have some thoughts.
There's no question the cost to live in San Francisco is expensive. Now a startup just purchased a building to house 400 people and is offering $700 a month rent. But there's a catch. Renters share space with hundreds of other people and sleep in sleeping pods. The company Brownstone Shared Housing just purchased this vacant building at 1049 Market Street where they plan to house 400 pods where people can sleep. But this isn't the first time they've tried something like this. Can you tell us what happened at their other downtown location at 12 Mint Plaza?
A few months ago, the story was a startup on the brink of collapse. They actually have a location right here across from where I'm at Mint Plaza at 5th and Mission Streets. It's their first location where they had 36 sleeping pods, these cubic pods that have twin mattresses that are stacked on top of each other and rented out, as you said, for $700 a month. So they actually faced an eviction lawsuit here just a few months ago. They were behind on a year's worth of rent, and it looked pretty grim at that point, but they managed to come back from that.
$700 a month for basically a bunk bed? I'm not sure how to process this. Let me ask you a question. If you were fresh out of college, single individual that moved to San Francisco for whatever reason, maybe a job called you to move to this area, or maybe you are a tech founder and you have a startup that you're working on and you want to be in the vicinity of San Francisco because of the synergy that you assume that you're going to get when living and moving around San Francisco. Would you be willing to stay in one of these units or bunk beds for $700 a month to live lean and to have a pretty low monthly burn rate in order for you to figure things out in real time? Honestly, as a person who has tried his hand at a few startups in the past, the answer for me is yes. Most definitely, I would undoubtedly spend that $700 in order for me to be where I need to be at that present moment, given this example that I'm giving you. Obviously, this type of living just wouldn't work for everybody. This would be fine for me as a single man coming fresh out of college with a concept that I'm trying to build into $1 billion business. Now, with regard to the startup allegedly almost failing and not being able to pay their rent for almost a year. That may sound bad. However, I also assume that this startup was able to learn a ton with regard to the operations of a facility such as this. And that learning experience is what they are able to sell investors when it comes to raising more money to in turn allow for them to be able to extend and expand their infrastructure in order for them to acquire more buildings and offer up more beds and ultimately get to a point where they could generate a profit for their organization. So when you talk about failure in the startup realm, failure is not necessarily looked at or frowned upon as long as you don't die, as long as you keep going, as long as you keep pushing forward and you figure out ways to survive. And it sounds like this is what this entity has been able to do up to this point.
So now they plan to implement that same concept at 1049 Market Street.
Right. So the interesting thing about this is that the founder, James Stallworth, has told me repeatedly that there is such huge demand for this type of housing that they are actually on an expansion course. And they had been looking for a location close by. They wanted to lease. And then I'm told this opportunity to buy a building came up. And as we know, in San Francisco right now, the commercial real estate market is down, it's depressed. So there are a lot of deals out there. So this founder reached out to building owners and happened to find someone who was willing to sell him an entire building. And that building has a really interesting history. It was a work-live building for artists back 10 years ago and had that kind of vibe, right? Had tenants in it before, but has been sitting empty for many years. So now the plan is to take it, convert it into these sleeping pods, and fill it with 400 tenants.
Commercial real estate in San Francisco is deeply, deeply discounted due to the number of businesses that have left San Francisco because of the high rents and other many challenges San Francisco is having right now. And so buying entire buildings at today's prices really means that investors can reposition assets in a much more profitable way. Let's talk about this high density concept of 400 pods at $700 a month. From rent alone, we're not talking storage fees, application fees. You're looking at $280,000 a month gross potential revenue. Theoretically, yields like this can outperform traditional multifamily. This model actually could become franchisable. LA, NYC, DC, Boston, Chicago, those high density markets could be great fits for a concept such as this.
Brownstone's website says their company offers the fastest way to convert office space into housing with the plug-and-play sleeping pods installed in just days. So can you talk about the regulation? Is this regulated in any way? What about permits and the legality of it?
That's an ambitious timeline, I have to say. To be frank, the location at 12 Mint Plaza is not fully permitted. And that was one of the issues that they've had, right? Prior to this eviction lawsuit that came this summer. They are still in talks with the city around permitting this as a legal use, having this commercial building, a former bank, become housing. And that's the same story really for the new building that they're buying. James told me that he is still working with the city to approve that as a sleeping pod dorm. And that is a process that can take some time. And it requires pulling permits, right? It requires inspections. It requires life safety investigations. So 3 days is ambitious, I would say.
So their biggest bottleneck isn't really construction, right? The facilities that they're putting these pods in, yeah, they're going to have to do some work on the shared bathrooms and the kitchen area, right? Maybe making sure that the HVAC is set up in a way where ventilation is to accommodate 400 bodies in one large area. But their biggest bottleneck isn't construction, it's actually permitting. As a developer, I can 100% tell you that a 3-day install means absolutely nothing if it takes 8 to 24 months to permit. And the fact that their prior site was operating without full permits raises major red flags when it comes to scalability. So on top of your permitting hurdles, you're going to have political scrutiny. And this is where certain members of city council just will not back this concept. You're going to have public relations challenges where the residents that potentially live near this building will be showing up to the city council meetings to demand that this is not approved for one reason or another. On top of that, you're going to have operational risks, as we see in the previous location. They went almost a year without paying their rent. You also have to be mindful that 400 people sharing bathrooms, common spaces, and really minimal privacy requires, in a way, hotel level operations. So this is not your typical property management. Things like noise, conflict resolution, cleaning, and turnover become daily priorities. And I can only imagine how much insurance for a concept like this is going to cost.
Can you talk about who the target market for a co-living situation like this is, which you in your article compared to just a massive dormitory?
That's what it is. They're sharing bathrooms, right? They're sharing common spaces. They're sharing living spaces. I think the story struck a chord with people because the immediate thought is this is going to be a tech dorm, right? We have AI having a surge in the city. We have a lot of tech workers coming in.
Imagine after a long day, you come here and you are amongst 399 other people and you just want to go to sleep, right? But when you get there, somebody may be playing music in one of their pods, somebody may be having company and having relations in another pod, somebody may be talking in the common area and it's echoing enough to a point where you can hear it. You may come back to your pod and your pillow is missing. I mean, this is the type of stuff that you're going to have to go through when it comes to this type of living. And it's so intriguing to me that in some markets, this is actually in such high demand that there is a waiting list. Specifically, the 35 unit pod that this startup had, at one point there was a waiting list. So this is in demand in certain markets.
This is a place for everyone. This is a place for artists. This is a place for people who need a cheap place to live. So it sounds like everyone is welcome.
And Laura, real quick before you go, have you reached out to the mayor or any city officials about this?
Yes, so definitely have been in touch with the planning department as I've covered this issue over the past year. And it sounds like there definitely is a little bit of a shift in how the city is thinking about repurposing buildings, commercial buildings to housing. Whereas James in the past has had issues with the permits. We're now in a new place. We have a lot of office vacancy. We have a lot of empty buildings downtown, and the city really wants those repurposed. So people like him coming in at this time in the market are having a really good opportunity.
So now I'm on the Brownstone website and they got imagery of potential residents that are in the common area, having a good time, eating dinner together, having a laugh. And as you can see, this is a shared experience, right? This is the kitchen area where individuals are sitting, having conversation from different walks of life. Maybe there's synergy when it comes to what everybody is working on. Not necessarily everybody, but maybe some folks that are part of this pod experience. And that is cool, right? Once again, this isn't for everybody. This would be for a particular individual that is looking for a really, really boiled down lifestyle. To be honest, I'm pretty intrigued by what this entity is being able to accomplish. This startup is brave enough to kind of step outside of the box and come up with a concept that allows for them to have a really good opportunity at profitability, to be honest. This is not necessarily a solution to affordability by any means. These pods are basically responding to the symptoms of unaffordability. True affordability requires pathways to stability, not long-term bunk bed living. With that said, the reuse of these vacant buildings is a huge win for a downtown ecosystem. Adding 400 new tenants to this one location, even temporarily, creates foot traffic, safety, and economic reinvigoration. So is pod housing the future? Is it innovation, desperation, or is it something in between? I'll let you be the judge on that. But one thing that is extremely clear is this: commercial to housing conversions will define the next decade of American cities. The question is whether we can innovate without lowering the bar for what people deserve with regard to long-term housing. Thanks for listening to me ramble. Would love to know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next video.